I had prepared my mother's preferred meal, poached salmon with a lemon butter sauce, accompanied by roasted carrots and a homemade peach tart. I even managed to locate the vintage floral tablecloth, the one with the worn edges my mother used to scold me about but was secretly fond of. This dinner marked my mother's 64th birthday, and I convinced myself that things would feel unlike before this year. Maybe not improved, but at least more subdued. The dining table accommodated 6. Diana sat at the head, with her bridge partner, Helen Markham, on one side, our cousin Scarlett Evans nearby, and 2 longtime neighbors who had watched me grow up since adolescence. I filled everyone's glasses and shared pleasant smiles across the platters of food. For a moment, I could almost make myself believe this was what affection felt like. But my mother picked up her wine and toasted to growing older, without carrying emotional burdens, her lips twisting into a sly smile as she twirled her glass. She continued, saying it was time to enjoy a life unencumbered by unnecessary attachments. My mother fixed her gaze right on me. To tell the truth, the greatest present I could give her would be to walk away from everything I know. No one uttered a word. My bridge partner let out a quiet cough. Scarlett Evans' utensil hovered, unmoving, above her plate. I fixed my gaze on my mother, Diana Holmgren, my eyelids fluttering once, then again. Clarification wasn't something I requested. Hearing those words repeated was the last thing I wanted. Rising gradually, I excused myself with a borrowed smile and made my way toward the kitchen. I held my hands beneath running cool water until my fingers grew numb. Afterward, I grabbed my coat from its hook and left the house without a farewell. That evening, I remained in the shadowy kitchen, my coat still on. The tart stayed where it was, untouched atop the counter. Dirty glasses, their rims tinted with lingering wine, sat half-washed in the sink. My attention landed on the chair where she had once sat. Posture rigid, a self-satisfied look in her eyes, making me question how many times she'd practiced delivering those words. Perhaps she hadn't needed to. Maybe it was pure reflex for her. My mind drifted to birthdays gone by, each one spent crafting gifts by hand. As a child, I would set candles out on my mother's front porch every year. I spent decades striving to gain something from her that she never intended for me to have. I got to my feet, put the leftovers in the refrigerator, and stared at the pile of dirty dishes. I left the dishes untouched. I lay down to sleep with a lingering silence on my tongue and my mother's words echoing in my mind. When morning arrived, I opened my journal to a fresh sheet. For a while, the page remained empty. Although I held the pen, I couldn't bring myself to write a single word. My hand hovered above the paper as if waiting for some unseen approval. As the quiet of the new day settled around me, old recollections flooded in on their own. I was 26 years old when I left grad school. My mother had taken a fall on the ice by her porch and broken her hip. "You're all I have," she told me on the phone, her voice frail and cunning. I recall the way Dr. Jonah Lilly's expression turned downcast when I told him I would have to drop out before the semester ended. "Just take a leave," he suggested softly. I gave a nod, but I never returned. That same week, I settled back into the family home. It was meant as a stopgap. Time crept on, little by little. Doctor visits, pills, grocery runs, daily tasks. I found work at a nearby library. The schedule was flexible and the location was convenient. I dated occasionally, but never with much commitment. Whenever anyone mentioned my future, I always found a way to steer the conversation elsewhere. When my mother offered to update the house, I agreed. She covered the yellow in the hallway that I adored and swapped the kitchen floor for chilly gray tiles. "It's more up to date," she told me. I told myself it made no difference. It was still my house, even if it no longer looked like the one I remembered. I let my mother get rid of the chair I'd purchased with my very first paycheck. I chuckled about it. When my mother, Diana Holmgren, called it tacky, I simply went along with her judgment. I agreed to every minor denial she made. That was the way things were between us. She requested, and I accommodated. Yet in the stillness of this morning, everything seemed altered. The routine wasn't loyalty, it was my own fading away. Bit by bit, I came undone, losing the line between who I was and what my mother expected of me. I set the pen down before actually committing anything to paper. I sacrificed so much in my attempts to keep my mother from feeling isolated. But it had never crossed my mind to wonder if I was permitted to wish for something beyond merely enduring my mother's presence. The ink seeped through the sheet. I ripped the page out, folded it with care, and slipped it into the journal's back cover. After that, I slid open the filing cabinet and started searching for my bank papers. Sleep didn't find me that night. Even as I lay still, my thoughts kept a restless pace. I replayed every moment when I should have stood up and said something. In some way, I should have set boundaries, made a decision that prioritized myself over her, but I never did. I waited until the whole ordeal became impossible to tolerate before I finally spoke the truth about it. When the sun came up, I brewed a cup of tea, but I left it untouched. I took a seat at the kitchen table, grabbed a fresh journal, and wrote down a sentence that seemed to have been waiting for years inside me. I have been erased from my own story. Seeing those words in ink struck me more deeply than I had expected. I went over them twice, then drew a line underneath for emphasis. That was where I started. I compiled a list of everything my mother, Diana Holmgren, could access. Shared bank accounts, the deed to the house, the kitchen notepad, where I had jotted down my passwords. My mother always acted as though she never saw it. I drew a circle around the items that required my immediate attention. After that, I collected every document I could find. Insurance paperwork, financial statements, the copy of the will I had. I had signed it years ago without ever reading the details. I got in touch with the bank and made an appointment with the bank manager, Paula Whitaker, to remove my mother, Diana Holmgren, as an authorized user. I looked up potential legal contacts and discovered a modest law firm a couple of towns away. The attorney was called Martin Tavares. I found his name appealing, strong, with no unnecessary flair. I didn't mention any of this to anyone. Not Charlotte Evans, not Sandra Muir. Absolutely not my mother. My actions had nothing to do with getting even. This wasn't about being upset either. It was simply release. After feeling suffocated for more than 10 years, I paused that afternoon in the hallway, surveying the house, not sentimentally, but analytically. I asked myself what truly belonged to me, what had been gifted, and what was taken from me without any say. My gaze settled on the battered maple desk beside the window. That was the final possession my father had handled before he passed away. I slid open the drawer and found the tiny envelope where I used to keep some backup money, but it was now gone. The following day, I drove out to meet with the lawyer, Martin Tavares. My mother eventually caught on, even if she didn't notice right away. I stopped reminding her about upcoming commitments. I quit trying to fill quiet moments with small talk. Instead, I only made meals for myself, choosing the small frying pan instead of the big one my mother and I had previously shared. My mother began lingering nearby again, sometimes flashing me insincere smiles and critiquing my outfit in a way that seemed like she was forcing herself to be motherly. One morning, my mother rapped on my bedroom door, holding a tray with oversteeped tea and some burnt toast. "I thought maybe you'd be worn out," she offered softly. "We haven't really spoken since." "Well, my mother gestured vaguely, purposely pretending to forget the words she'd engraved right into my heart. "Are you referring to your birthday?" I asked. She gave me a blank stare. "That? Oh, please. I was only joking. I'd had too much to drink." People make comments. I gave a nod but kept Sandra Muir, my neighbor, outside. A few days later, I found myself sitting across from Paula Whitaker, the bank manager, as she brought up my account activity. I paid close attention to her expression as each new transaction appeared on her screen. Someone has been moving money on a regular basis into another checking account, Paula Whitaker remarked. While they're not large transfers, they happen often. Altogether, more than $6,000 has been moved this year. I stayed silent. There was nothing that needed saying. I was already aware. That night, I came across my mother folding laundry in the basement. She glanced up at me with that worn-out look she always wore like a shield. I told her I'd noticed the debits, and she immediately stiffened. She asked what I meant. I clarified it was my own account, thousands withdrawn without permission. My mother let out a breath and placed a towel in the basket. She told me I was making too much of it. My mother explained the money had gone toward essentials, house repairs, medication, and taking care of my car. I pointed out she hadn't asked me. She insisted I wouldn't have cared. She suddenly barked that I'd always claimed we were a team. She exclaimed, "God, you're acting incredibly self-centered." I simply looked at her. "Self-centered?" I echoed. "That's right," she responded, her tone climbing. "You behave as though you deserve special treatment just for being here." I remained silent. I brushed past her and headed up the staircase to my bedroom. I turned the lock after closing the door, not out of fear, but because I'd rather not have to explain the boundary I was setting. When morning came, I discovered a letter in the mailbox, with no return address. The envelope was unmarked, the paper heavy and crisply folded in thirds. No sender was listed, but I could tell who had written it before I even unfolded the page. Precise, gently angled script, meticulously composed. Elaine Penfield lived 2 houses away. I'd probably only exchanged words with her a dozen times over a decade and a half. She always greeted me with a wave from her porch, never stopping for conversation. "Dear Diana, I hope you don't mind me sending this letter. I don't wish to disturb you, but I've observed from where I sat and looked out my window for quite a while. It wasn't out of curiosity, but rather to quietly witness what was happening. I've noticed all that you've shouldered, all that you've sacrificed, and how you retreat so others can feel at ease. You aren't unseen, and you haven't made a mistake." With a gentle sense of respect, I read Elaine Penfield's note twice, and then read it once more, letting the words wash over me again. My eyes burned, not from pain, but from the unfamiliar relief of being recognized without needing to justify who I am. Carefully, I refolded the letter along its original crease and tucked it into the back pocket of my journal, next to the torn-out page I had written after my birthday. It didn't solve any of my problems, but it steadied something inside me that had felt shaky for a long time. That night, I made dinner only for myself, not inviting anyone else to join. My mother never brought it up. Once I'd finished cleaning the dishes, I powered up my laptop and began searching. I looked for a notary close to the county clerk's office. I had already called Martin Tavares. The next thing I needed to do was sign the paperwork. Before going to sleep, I double-checked the locks and set the journal on my nightstand where I could keep it in sight. The following morning, I put on understated clothes and drove over to the lawyer's office. Martin was composed, methodical, and deliberate. His office carried a faint scent of cedar, with certificates I had no reason to examine adorning the walls. I felt confident in him as soon as he assured me, "You don't need a war. You need a boundary you can maintain." We devoted most of the next hour to endorsing documents. Martin guided me meticulously through the process, putting joint accounts on hold, making changes to the deed, editing my will. When we reached the last document, he gently pushed it in my direction. I paused for a moment, then signed my name. Stepping outside, I noticed the wind had begun to blow harder. By the time I returned, the first raindrops had begun to fall. My mother was in the kitchen. She glanced up from the crossword puzzle she'd been working on and fixed me with a suspicious look. "Where have you been out?" she asked. "Lately, you've been secretive and withdrawn. I don't appreciate it." I chose not to respond. I went straight upstairs. That evening, the real storm hit. Not outside, but over the phone. It began with a voicemail from my cousin, Emily. "What's happening over there? Your mom called me. She says you're shutting her out." "That's really harsh, Marin." After that, I received some texts from old neighbors, those vaguely concerned, almost accusatory, just checking in messages. Then Charlotte Evans messaged me, not bothering to be tactful. "I can't believe you're treating her this way, after all she's done for you." I set my phone face down on the table and let it keep buzzing until the notifications finally stopped. Downstairs, doors banged louder than necessary. The kitchen drawers opened and closed with pointed force. My mother moved through the house with deliberate, thudding steps, as though sheer noise could drive her guilt upstairs. I remained in my bedroom, documenting everything in writing. My intention isn't to punish my mother. I am taking back what rightfully belongs to me. The following morning, my mother hammered on my door. "You've made your point," she barked. "Now fix it." I cracked the door just wide enough to answer. "This isn't some contest, Mom. There's nothing for me to reverse." She looked at me in disbelief. "You'll be sorry for this." "Perhaps," I replied, "but if I do regret it, the remorse will be my own." I closed the door and secured the lock. 2 days after that, an official notice arrived at the house, certified, notarized, and final. Before the week ended, my mother had left. She departed without a farewell. Just after sunrise, I heard her hauling her suitcases along the wooden floorboards. Her voice, sharp and muttering, echoed through the walls as she contacted someone to come and get her. A vehicle waited outside with its engine running for about 10 minutes. Eventually, the front door banged shut, and after that, silence settled over the house. I remained upstairs for another hour before going down. The living room was quiet and undisturbed. Some picture frames were gone, a few drawers stood ajar, but the structure of the home remained intact. This house truly belonged to me now, with my name alone listed on the deed. The silence settled in around me, but this time, it wasn't full of reproach. Instead, it felt like taking a deep breath. There was finally room to breathe. I moved at my own pace. I retrieved the wildflower painting I had hidden away 5 years ago. It found its place again, hanging above the fireplace. I swapped out the light bulbs in the hallway for warmer ones. I took my grandmother's quilt from the attic and draped it on the couch, finding comfort in the still soft blue and green threads beneath my hands. I threw open every window in the house, letting fresh air flow freely through each room until any trace of her perfume had disappeared. Later that night, I came across an old tea tin hidden at the back of the cupboard, one I used to stash in my nightstand drawer before my mother decided it was unnecessary. I brewed myself a mug and sipped it out on the back porch, legs curled beneath me, watching as the sun sank behind the trees. I thought perhaps tears might come, but they didn't. Not just yet. Instead, I lingered there, enveloped in a stillness so deep it felt unfamiliar. It wasn't a feeling of triumph or relief, but something else entirely. Something like coming home. That night, I kept the bedroom door ajar while I slept. When I woke, I decided to sign up for an art course at the local community center. The studio carried a faint smell of pencil shavings and turpentine, well used, inviting, free from requirements. Not a single person questioned my reasons for being there. Nobody inquired about my surname. Choosing a seat near the rear, I set down my sketchbook and waited. The art instructor, a woman named Greta Sanders with gray-streaked curls and paint-splattered sleeves, greeted our group simply. She told us, "We're not here to excel. We're here to start." I hadn't picked up a pencil to draw since I was 22. Not in any real way. Not since I graduated, closing that chapter of my life as if it were a luxury out of reach. At first, my marks were tentative, my hand feeling rigid and out of practice with motions that once came naturally. But as I came to the second class, something inside me loosened. I no longer drew to impress anyone else. I drew because it felt as natural as breathing once more. None of the people in class had ever heard of my mother, Diana Holmgren. Nobody there was aware of the bank accounts, the slamming doors, or the birthday toast that had broken something within me. To them, I was simply the person who captured shadows with my pencil, blended with the side of my thumb, and shared laughter. I was quietly taken aback when someone made a joke in a low voice. That small moment was sufficient. Every week, I returned home with charcoal dust on my fingertips and a deep calm I never bothered to describe. Gradually, I started changing the house, one small section at a time. I brushed a light sage color onto the guest bathroom walls and moved the reading lamp to the opposite side of the sofa. I put up my own drawings in frames, gentle studies of hands, trees, and once, just a single daisy. One day in the kitchen, I noticed I was quietly singing as I cooked. The realization caught me off guard. I couldn't recall the last time I'd made noise merely for the sake of it. Later that night, I sat by the window with my journal and wrote one line. "I'm not starting from scratch. I'm reclaiming the life I set aside." Right then, the phone rang. I recognized her voice immediately, even though it sounded emptier than before. "Maren," she breathed, just loud enough for me to hear. "It's me." I stayed silent. The phone felt warm against my palm, suspended somewhere between reflex and recollection. "I'm not doing well," my mother went on. "The doctors discovered something, and I thought you deserved to know." I let the pause linger between us. She breathed out heavily. "The children ask after you. They're missing you. All of us are." Hearing her say "we" landed the hardest blow. I could easily visualize her using that word, her hand pressed to her chest, as if it explained everything before. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her tone gentler now. "I said things I shouldn't have. But this place isn't the same without me in it. Nothing here feels right anymore." I stared out the window, where the drawing of daisies hung in the far corner of the glass. Every hour, the sunlight altered its appearance. It had started to serve as a sort of clock for me, marking the passage of time through its changing look. "I'm happy the kids are doing well," I replied. "And I hope you're receiving the support you need." She hesitated. "Could we have a conversation? Maybe I could visit, just to see you." I let my eyes drift shut. "I can't return to being small so that you can experience being large," I murmured softly. She let out a sharp sigh. Hurt or upset, I couldn't distinguish between the two. "So, that's the end. That's the end." She ended the call. I felt no tears welling up. I didn't tremble. I simply remained seated, focusing on my breath. The silence no longer resembled a form of punishment. The following morning, I walked into the garden with a trowel in one hand and a seed packet in the other. The dirt was parched, but yielding, the sort that was receptive to transformation. I nestled the lavender starts into the ground, carefully leaving space between each one, then planted sage in a line along the back of the fence. I moved slowly. Each scoop of soil felt like an assurance. When I rose and arched my back, the sunlight slanted low and gentle across my porch. A soft wind rustled the leaves above, and for the first time in ages, I listened to the world without any layer of anxiety. I remained outside until the light deepened into a golden hue. That's when an unexpected knock sounded. Two girls, likely around 7 or 8 years old, stood on my front step, their faces bright with eager, open expressions. One of them gripped a basket lined with a dish towel. "Hello," began the taller child. "These are from my mother," she explained. The younger girl bumped her companion and piped up. "She says your garden gives her courage." Momentarily stunned, I blinked in surprise. "That's so sweet," I replied, crouching down so we were eye to eye. "Let her know I appreciate it," I told them. With grins, the pair dashed away before I could add anything else, their laughter drifting after them like a trailing ribbon. I brought the basket indoors and placed it on the kitchen table. The muffin, still warm inside, released a comforting aroma. The scent reminded me of cinnamon mixed with apples. I waited before taking a bite, remaining still and allowing the silence to drift and expand in the space around me. Sometime afterwards, I struck a match to light a candle in the living room and reached for my journal. I scribbled down, "I always believed vanishing would ruin me. But perhaps I was never destined for their attention. Perhaps I was supposed to witness myself." The candle's flame danced, spreading a gentle ring of light across the journal pages. After that, I flipped to a new page and started to write.